Section 5 of Highways in Hiding by George O. Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. I did not go to the police. They were sick of my face and already considering me a candidate for the paranoid ward. All I would have to do is go roaring into the station to tell them that I had uncovered some deep plot where the underground was using ornamental road signs to conceal their own network of roads and directions, and that the disappearance of Catherine Lewis, Dr. Thorndyke, and the removal of the Harrisons were all tied together. Instead, I closed my apartment and told everyone that I was going to take a long, rambling tourist jaunt to settle my nerves, that I thought getting away from the scene might finish the job that time and rest had started. Then I started to drive. I drove for several days, not attempting to pace off miles, but covering a lot of aimless direction territory. I was just as likely to spend 4 hours going north on one highway and then take the next 4 coming back south on a parallel highway, and sometimes I even came back to the original starting place. After a week, I had come no farther west than across that sliver of West Virginia into eastern Ohio. And in eastern Ohio, I saw some more of the now familiar and suspicious road signs. The emblem was right side up, and the signs looked as though they had not been up long. I followed that road for 75 miles, and as I went, the signs kept getting newer and newer until I finally came to a truck loaded with pipe, hardware, and ornamental ironwork. Leading the truck was one of those iron mole things. I watched the automatic gear hoist one of the old pipe and white and black enamel road signs up by its roots and place it on a truck full of discards. I watched the mole drive a corkscrew blade into the ground with a roaring of engine and bucking of the truck. It paused, pulled upward to bring out the screw and its load of dirt, stones, and gravel. The crew placed one of the new signs in the cradle, and I watched the machine set the sign upright, pour the concrete, tamp down the earth, and then move along down the road. There was little point in asking questions of the crew, so I just took off and drove to Columbus as hard as I could make it. Shined, cleaned, polished, and very conservatively dressed, I presented myself to the State Commissioner of Roads and Highways. I toyed briefly with the idea of representing myself as a minor official from some distant state like Alaska or the Virgin Islands, inquiring about these signs for official reasons. But then I knew that if I bumped into a hot telepath, I'd be in the soup. On the other hand, mere curiosity on the part of a citizen, well oiled with compliments, would get me at the very least a polite answer. The commissioner's 5th undersecretary bucked me down the hall. Another office bucked me upstairs. A third buck-around brought me to the Department of Highways, Marking, and Road Maps. A sub-secretary finally admitted that he might be able to help me. His name was Houghton. But whether he was telepath or esper did not matter, because the commission building was constructed right in the middle of a dead area. I still played it straight. I told him I was a citizen of New York, interested in the new road signs, Ohio was to be commended, etc. "I'm glad you feel that way," he said, beaming. I presume these signs cost quite a bit more than the stark black and white enamel jobs? "On the contrary," he said with pride. "They might, but mass production methods brought the cost down. You see, the enamel jobs, while we buy several thousand of the plates for any highway, must be set up, stamped out, enameled, and so on. The new signs are all made in one plant as they are needed. I don't suppose you know, but the highway number and any other information is put on the plate from loose snap-in letters. That means we can buy so many thousand of this or that letter or number and the necessary base plates and put them together as needed. They admitted that they were still running at a loss, but if they could get enough states interested, they'd eventually come out even. And maybe they could reduce the cost. Why, they even have a contingent clause in the contract stating that if the cost were lowered, they would make a rebate to cover it. That's so first users will not bide their time instead of buying now." He went on and on and on like any bureaucrat. I was glad we were in a dead area because he'd have thrown me out of his office for what I was thinking. Eventually, Mr. Houghton ran down and I left. I toyed around with the idea of barging in on the main office of the company, but I figured that might be too much like poking my head into a hornet's nest. I pocketed the card he gave me from the company, and I studied the ink-fresh road map which he had proudly supplied. It pointed out in a replica panel of the fancy signs that the state of Ohio was beautifying their highways with these new signs at no increased cost to the taxpayer, and that the dates in green on the various highways here and there gave the dates when the new signs would be installed. The bottom of the panel gave the road commissioner's name in boldface, with Houghton's name below in slightly smaller print. I smiled. Usually I get mad at signs that proclaim that such and such a tunnel is being created by Mayor so-and-so, as if the good mayor were out there with a shovel and hoe digging the tunnel. But this sort of thing would have been a worthy cause if it hadn't been for the sinister side. I selected a highway that had been completed toward Cincinnati and made my way there with no waste of time. The road was new, and it was another beaut. The signs led me on, mile after mile and sign after sign. I did not know what I was following, and I was not sure I knew what I was looking for. But I was on the trail of something, and a bit of activity, both mental and physical, after weeks of blank wall frustration, made my spirits rise and my mental equipment sharper. The radio in the car was yangling with hillbilly songs, the only thing you can pick up in Ohio, but I didn't care. I was looking for something significant. I found it late in the afternoon, about halfway between Dayton and Cincinnati. One of the spokes was missing. 50 yards ahead was a crossroad. I hauled in with a whine of rubber and brakes and sat there trying to reason out my next move by logic. Do I turn with the missing spoke, or do I turn with the one that is not missing? Memory came to my aid. The 10 o'clock spoke had been missing back there near the Harrison farm. The Harrisons had lived on the left side of the highway. One follows the missing spoke. Here the 2 o'clock spoke was missing, so I turned to the right along the crossroad until I came to another sign that was complete. Then, wondering, I U-turned and drove back across the main highway and drove for about 5 miles, watching the signs as I went. The ones on my right hand had that trefoil emblem upside down. The ones on my left were right side up. The difference was so small that only someone who knew the significance would distinguish one from the other. So far as I could reason out, it meant that what I sought was in the other direction. When the emblem was upside down, I was going away from, and when right side up, I was going toward. Away from or toward what? I U-turned again and started following the signs. 20 miles beyond the main highway, where I'd seen the sign that announced the turn, I came upon another missing spoke. This indicated a turn to the left, so I slowed down until I came upon a homestead road leading off toward a farmhouse. I turned, determined to make like a man lost and hoping that I'd not bump into a telepath. A few hundred yards in from the main road, I came upon a girl who was walking briskly toward me. I stopped. She looked at me with a quizzical smile and asked me if she could be of any help. Brashly, I nodded. "I'm looking for some old friends of mine," I said. "Haven't seen them for years. Named Harrison?" She smiled up at me. "I don't know any Harrison around here." Her voice had the Ohio twang. "No?" "Just where do they live?" I eyed her carefully, hoping my glance did not look like a wolf eyeing a lamb. "Well, they gave me some crude directions, said I was to turn at the main highway onto this road and come about 20 miles and stop on the left side when I came upon one of those new road signs where someone had shot one of the spokes out. Spokes? Left side? She mumbled the words and was apparently mulling the idea around in her mind. She was not more than about 17, suntanned and animal alive from living in the open. I wondered about her. As far as I was concerned, she was part and parcel of this whole mysterious affair. No matter what she said or did, it was an obvious fact that the hidden road sign directions pointed to this farm. And since no one at 17 can be kept in complete ignorance of the business of the parents, she must be aware of some of the ramifications. After some thought, she said, "No, I don't know any Harrisons." I grunted. I was really making the least of this now that I'd arrived. "Your folks at home?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "I think I'll drop in and ask them, too." She shrugged. "Go ahead," she said with the noncommittal attitude of youth. "You didn't happen to notice whether the mailbox flag was up, did you?" I hadn't, but I espied back quickly and said, "No, it isn't." "Then the mailman hasn't been to deliver," she said. "Mind if I ride back to the house with you, mister?" "Hop in." She smiled brightly and got in quickly. I took off down the road toward the house at an easy pace. She seemed interested in the car and finally said, "I've never been in a car like this before. New?" "Few weeks," I responded. "Fast?" "If you want to make it go fast. She'll take this rocky road at 50 if anybody wants to be so foolish." "Let's see." I laughed. Nobody but an idiot would tackle a road like this at 50. "I like to go fast. My brother takes it at 60. That, so far as I was concerned, was youthful exaggeration. I was busy telling her all the perils of fast driving when a rabbit came barreling out of the bushes along one side and streaked across in front of me. I twitched the wheel. The car went out of the narrow road and up on the shoulder, tilting quite a bit. Beyond the rabbit, I swung back into the road, but not before the youngster had grabbed my arm to keep from being tossed all over the seat. Her grip was like a hydraulic vice. My arm went numb and my fingers went limp on the wheel. I struggled with my left hand to spin the wheel to keep on the narrow, winding road, and my foot hit the brake to bring the car down, but fast. Taking a deep breath as we stopped, I shook my right hand by holding it in my left at the wrist. I was a mass of tingling pins and needles because she had grabbed me just above the elbow. It felt as though it would have taken only a trifle more to pinch my arm off and leave me with a bloody stump. "Sorry, mister," she said breathlessly, her eyes wide open. Her face was white around the corners of the mouth and at the edges of her nose. The whiteness of the flesh under the deep tan gave her a completely frightened look, far more than the shake-up could have produced. I reached over and took her hand. "That's a mighty powerful grip you—" The flesh of her hand was hard and solid. Not the meaty solidity of good tone, fine training, and excellent health. It was the solidity of all I could think of at the time was a green cucumber. I squeezed a bit, and the flesh gave way only a trifle. I rubbed my thumb over her palm and found it solid hard instead of soft and yielding. I wondered. I had never seen a case of Mekstrom's disease before. I looked down at the hand and said, "Young lady, do you realize that you have an advanced case of Mekstrom's disease?" She eyed me coldly. "Now," she said in a hard voice, "I know you'll come in." Something in my makeup objects violently to being ordered around by a slip of a girl. I balance off at about 160. I guessed her about 2/3 of that, say 110 or thereabouts. 1/8. she said levelly. A telepath. Yes, she said calmly. And I don't mind letting you know it so you'll not try anything stupid. I'm getting the heck out of here. No, you're not. You are coming in with me. Like heck, I exploded. Don't be silly. You'll come in. Or shall I lay one along your jaw and carry you? I had to try something, anything, to get free. Yet, now you're being unbright, she told me insolently. You should know that you can't plan any surprise move with a telepath. And if you try a frontal attack, I'll belt you so cold they'll have to put you in the oven for a week. I just let her ramble for a few seconds because when she was rattling this way, she couldn't put her entire mental attention on my thoughts. So while she was yakking it off, I had an idea that felt as though it might work. She shut up like a clam when she realized that her mouthing had given me a chance to think, and I went into high gear with my perception. Not bad for a kid. Growing up fast. Been playing hooky from Mama, leaving off your panties like the big girls do. I can tell by the elastic cord marks you had 'em on not long ago. 17ers have a lot more modesty than they like to admit. She was stunned by my cold-blooded catalog of her body, just long enough for me to make a quick lunge across her lap to the door handle on her side. I flipped it over and gave her a shove at the same time. She went bottom over appetite in a sprawl that would have jarred the teeth loose in a normal body and might have cracked a few bones. But she landed on the back of her neck, rolled, and came to her feet like a cat. I didn't wait to close the door. I just tromped on the go pedal, and the car leaped forward with a jerk that slammed the door for me. I roared forward and left her just as she was making another grab. How I hoped to get out of there, I did not know. All I wanted was momentary freedom to think. I turned this way and that to follow the road until I came to the house. I left the road, circled the house with the turbine screaming like a banshee and the car taking the corners on the outside wheels. I skidded into a turn like a racing driver and ironed my wheels out flat on the takeaway, rounded another corner and turned back into the road again, going the other way. She was standing there waiting for me as I pelted past at a good 60, and she reached out one girder-strong arm, latched onto the frame of the open window on my side, and swung onto the half-inch trim along the bottom of the car body like a switchman hooking a freight car. She reached for the steering wheel with her free hand. I knew what was to happen next. She'd casually haul, and I'd go off the road into a tree, or pile up in a ditch, and while the smoke was clearing out of my mind, she'd be untangling me from the wreck and carting me over her shoulder without a scratch to show for her adventure. I yanked the wheel, whip-whap, cutting an arc. I slammed past a tree, missing it by half an inch. I wiped her off the side of the car like a mailbag is clipped from the fast express by the catch hook. I heard a cry of "woof" as her body hit the trunk of the tree. But as I regained the road and went racing on to safety, I saw in the rearview mirror that she had bounced off the tree, sprawled a bit, caught her balance, and was standing in the middle of the road shaking her small but very dangerous fist at my tail license plate. I didn't stop driving at 110 until I was above Dayton again. Then I paused along the road to take stock. Stock? What the hell did I know, really? I'd uncovered and confirmed the fact that there was some secret organization that had a program that included their own highway system concealed within the confines of the United States. I was almost certain by this time that they had been the prime movers in the disappearance of Catherine and Dr. Thorndyke. I suddenly relived the big crack-up. Willingly now, no longer rejecting the memory, I followed my recollection as Catherine and I went along that highway at a happy pace. With care, I recalled every detail of Catherine, watching the road through my mind and eyes, how she'd mentioned the case of the missing spoke, how I'd projected back to perceive that which I had not been conscious of. Reminding myself that it was past, I went through it again, deliberately. The fallen limb that blocked the road, my own horror as the wheels hit it, the struggle to regain control of the careening car. As a man watching a motion picture, I watched the sky and the earth turn over and over, and I heard my voice mouthing wordless shouts of fear. Catherine's cry of pain and fright came, and I listened as my mind reconstructed it, this time without wincing. Then the final crash, the horrid wave of pain and the sear of the flash fire. I went through my own horror and self-condemnation and my concern over Catherine. I didn't shut it off. I waded through it. Now I remembered something else. Something that any normal, sensible mind would reject as an hallucination. Beyond any shadow of a doubt, there had been no time for a man to rig a block and tackle on a tree above a burning automobile in time to get the trapped victims out alive. And even more certain it was that no normal man of 50 would have had enough strength to lift a car by its front bumper while his son made a rush into the flames. That tackle had been rigged and burned afterward. But who would reject a block and tackle in favor of an impossibly strong man? No, with the tackle in sight, the recollection of a man lifting that overturned automobile like a weightlifter pressing up a barbell would be buried in any mind as a rank hallucination. Then one more item came driving home hard, so hard that I almost jumped when the idea crossed my mind. Both Catherine and Dr. Thorndyke had been telepaths. A telepath close to any member of this underground outfit would divine their purpose, come to know their organization, and begin to grasp the fundamentals of their program. Such a person would be dangerous. On the other hand, an esper such as myself could be turned aside with bland remarks and a convincing attitude. I knew that I had no way of telling lie from truth, and that made my problem a lot more difficult. From the facts that I did have, something smelled of overripe seafood. Government and charities were pouring scads of dough into a joint called the Medical Research Center. To hear the scholars of medicine tell it, Mekstrom's disease was about the last human frailty that hadn't been licked to a standstill. They boasted that if a victim of practically anything had enough life left in him to crawl to a telephone and use it, his life could be saved. They grafted well. I'd heard tales of things like fingers, and I know they were experimenting on hands, arms, and legs with some success. But when it came to Mekstrom's, they were stopped cold. Therefore, the Medical Research Center received a walloping batch of money for that alone. All the money that used to go to the various heart, lung, spine, and cancer funds. It added up well. But the Medical Research Center seemed unaware that some group had solved their basic problem. From the books I've read, I am well aware of one of the fundamental principles of running an underground. Keep it underground. The commie menace in these United States might have won out in the middle of the century if they'd been able to stay a secret organization. So the highways in hiding could stay underground and be an efficient organization only until someone smoked them out. That one was going to be me. But I needed an aide-de-camp. Especially and specifically, I needed a trained telepath, one who would listen to my tale and not instantly howl for the nuthatch attendants. The FBI were all trained investigators, and they used esper telepath teams all the time. One dug the joint while the other dug the inhabitant, which covered the situation to a fare-thee well. It would take time to come up with a possible helper, so I spent the next hour driving toward Chicago, and by the time I'd crossed the Ohio-Indiana line and hit Richmond, I had a plan laid out. I placed a call to New York, and within a few minutes I was talking to Nurse Farrow. I'll not go into detail because there was a lot of mishmash that is not particularly interesting, and a lot more that covered my tracks since I'd parted company with her on the steps of the hospital. I did not, of course, mention my real purpose over the telephone, and Miss Farrow could not read my mind from New York. The upshot of the deal was that I felt I needed a nurse for a while. Not that I was ill, but that I felt a bit woozy now and then because I hadn't learned to slow down. I worked too fast and too long, and my condition was not up to it yet. This Miss Farrow allowed as being quite possible. I repeated my offer to pay her at the going prices for registered nurses with a 1-month guarantee, paid in advance. That softened her quite a bit. Then I added that I'd videograph her a check large enough to cover the works, plus a round-trip ticket. She should come out and have a look, and if she weren't satisfied, she could return without digging into her own pocket. All she'd lose was 1 day, and it might be a bit of a vacation if she enjoyed flying in a jetliner at 60,000 feet. The accumulation of offers finally sold her, and she agreed to arrange a leave of absence. She'd meet me in the morning of the day after tomorrow at Central Airport in Chicago. I videographed the check and then took off again, confident that I'd be able to sell her on the idea of being the telepath half of my amateur investigation team. Then, because I needed some direct information, I turned west and crossed the line into Indiana, heading toward Marion. So far I had a lot of well-placed suspicions, but until I was certain, I could do no more than postulate ideas. I had to know definitely how to identify Mekstrom's disease, or at least the infected flesh. I have a fairly good recall. All I needed now was to have someone point to a case and say flatly that this was a case of Mekstrom's disease. Then I'd know whether what I'd seen in Ohio was actually 100% Mekstrom. End of Chapter 5.